الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول فإن تولوا فإنما عليه ما حمل وعليكم ما حملتم وإن تطيعوا تهتدوا وما على الرسول إلا البلاغ المبين وعد الله الذين آمنوا منكم وعملوا الصالحات ليستخلفنهم في الأرض كما استخلف الذين من قبلهم وليمكنن لهم دينهم الذي ارتضى لهم وليبدلنهم من بعد خوفهم أمنا يعبدونني لا يشركون بي شيئا ومن كفر بعد ذلك فأولئك هم الفاسقون وأقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة وأطيعوا الرسول لعلكم ترحمون لا تحسبن الذين كفروا معجزين في الأرض ومأواهم النار ولبئس المصير. Translation. Say, obey Allah and obey the Messenger, but if you turn away, then upon him is his burden, and upon you is your burden. And if you obey him, you will be rightly guided. And the Messenger is not responsible but for the plain delivery of the message. Allah has promised to those among you who believe and do good works that he will surely make them successors in the earth, as he made successors from among those who were before them, and he will surely establish for them their religion, which he has chosen for them, and he will surely give them in exchange security and peace after the affair. They will worship me, and they will not associate anything with me. Then whoso is ungrateful after that, they will be the rebellious. And observe prayer and give the zakah, and obey the messenger that you may be shown mercy. Think not that those who disbelieve can frustrate or plan in the earth. Their abode is hell, and it is indeed an evil resort. Jazakallah.
And next is Nazam by Bilal Raja Sahib.
Mirza, we have a hadith.
I'm sorry. Hadith is Murabi Usama Rahman Sahib, please.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah.
Salam.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. Kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim. Innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad. Kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim. Innaka Hamidum Majid. I will be presenting a hadith regarding the importance of attaching to a jamaat and an imam. This is taken from Sahih Bukhari, Kitab al-Fitan. Hazrat Huzaifa ibn al-Yaman, may Allah be pleased with him, narrates, people used to ask the Prophet of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, about the good, but I used to ask him about the evil, lest it should be overtaken. So I said, O Prophet of Allah, we were living in ignorance and in an evil atmosphere. Then Allah brought us this good, meaning Islam. Will there be any evil after this good? He said, yes. I said, will there be any good after that evil? He replied, yes, but it will be tainted, meaning it will not be pure. I asked, what will be its taint? He replied, there will be some people who will guide others not according to my tradition. You will approve of some of their deeds and disapprove of some others. I asked, will there be any evil after that good? He replied, yes. There will be some people calling at the gates of the hellfire, and whoever will respond to them, whoever will respond to their call, will be thrown by them into the hellfire. I said, O Prophet of Allah, will you describe them to us? He said, they will be from our own people and will speak our language. I said, what do you order me to do? What do you order me to do if such a state should take place in my life? He said, attach firmly to the jamaat of Muslims and their imam. He said, attach firmly to the jamaat of Muslims and their imam. I said, if there is neither a jamaat of Muslims nor an imam, he said, then turn away from all of those sects. Even if you were to bite or eat the roots of a tree till death overtakes you while you are in that state. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa barik wa sallam innaka Hamidum Majid.
Jazakallah. Next is Nazam by Bilal Raja Sahab.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. सैयदना हज़रत अक़दस मसीह माऊद व महदी माऊद अलैहिस्सलातु वस्सलाम के पाकीज़ा मंसूम कलाम में से चंद हमदिया अशार पेश खिदमत हैं। तेरे बिन मेरी जान ये जिंदगी क्या खाक है, तेरे बिन मेरी जान ये जिंदगी क्या खाक है, ऐसे जीने से तो बेहतर, ऐसे जीने से तो बेहतर मर के हो जाना गुबार, तेरे बिन मेरी जान ये जिंदगी क्या खाक है। जिसको तेरी धुन लगी आखिर वो तुझको जा मिला, जिसको तेरी धुन लगी آخر وہ تجھ کو جا ملا، آخر وہ تجھ کو جا ملا، جس کو بے چینی ہے یہ وہ پا گیا آخر قرار، جس کو بے چینی ہے یہ وہ پا گیا آخر قرار، تیرے بن میری جان یہ زندگی کیا خاک ہے، رنگ تقویٰ سے کوئی رنگت نہیں ہے خوب تر، رنگ تقویٰ سے کوئی رنگت نہیں ہے خوب تر، رنگت نہیں ہے خوب تر، ہے یہی ماں کا زیور، ہے یہی دین کا سنگار، ہے یہی ماں کا زیور، ہے یہی دین کا سنگار، تیرے بن میری جان یہ زندگی کیا خاک ہے، اس جہاں کو چھوڑنا ہے تیرے دیوانوں کا کام، اس جہاں کو چھوڑنا ہے تیرے دیوانوں کا کام، تیرے دیوانوں کا کام، نقد پالے تے ہیں وہ اور دوسرے امیدوار، نقد پالے ہیں وہ اور دوسرے امیدوار، تیرے بن میری جان یہ زندگی کیا خاک ہے۔ Translation: Without thee, my soul, this life is but naught. Better than such living is to die and turn to dust. He who cherished thee, he finally found thee. Whoever has such restlessness, he finally found the peace. No hue is better than the hue of God-fearing. It is the ornament of faith. It is the adornment of religion. It is the task of thy lovers to let go of this world. They get paid in cash, while others only remain hopeful.
Jazakallah. Next is welcome announced by Sadr Majlis Programming MTA, Dr. Majid Abdullah Sahib.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Jazakumullah to everyone who's joined the call today. I want to first thank our Ameer Jama'at USA, Sahib Mirza Maghfoor Sahib, for hosting this session of ours. The idea of this program, called Blessings of Khilafat, is for each of us to understand the importance of Khilafat in our lives. We'll be speaking on how Majlis Khuddamul Ahmadiyya can truly safeguard Khilafat. We'll hear various anecdotes from Khuddam. We'll hear the words of Hazrat Khuddamul Masih on what it means to have Khilafat. And I want to introduce our main speaker for tonight, Asif Basit sahib. He's joining us from London, and I'm very thankful that he's joining us. It's late, it's past 10 p.m. there at the moment, and he'll be spending the evening with us. Asif Sahib is the Director of Programming for MTA International. He's also the curator of the Ahmadiyya archives. He oversees the Al-Hakam newspaper. And he does many other projects under the direct guidance of Hazrat Khuddamul Masih. So needless to say, he's very close to Hazur, and I'm very thankful that he's here to join us to spend the evening with us. Jazakallah.
Next is address by respected Asif Basit Sahib. We welcome him, even though you are invited by Khuddamul MTA USA, but on behalf of Jamaat USA, I welcome you and thank you for joining us and giving us your time from your busy schedule, sir, and would address us and give us some things to follow.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah, and Jazakumullah, respected Ameer Sahib, thank you very much. And Sadr Sahib Khuddamul MTA as well for the good words that you've said. I was enough nervous already, and I really didn't need this to add to that, but please pray for me that I'm able to share something that we can all benefit from. So like the agenda, the screen, the slide says, and like Ameer Sahib has just said, about an address. So if I'd like to tell my brothers all who are joined here that because I don't know how to address, it will be very short. It's by way of sharing thoughts that we'll be together this evening, and anything that I say, I will take myself, and please take me to be the first addressee. I would be the first muhatib of whatever I say. So may Allah enable us all to learn directly from Khilafat. We all share the experiences, the good experiences, the good lessons that we've learned. So it will just be an attempt of doing that. I would like to now go into a little bit of the discussion that we want to have today. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. A question that I think we always, all of us need to bear in mind is that do we need Khilafat, or does Khilafat need us? So I think that is the first and basic thing that for everyone, especially the youth, that we should all clear about. So when we ask this question to ourselves, that is it Khilafat that needs us? Is it need of us, or are we in need of Khilafat? Before getting an answer, it entails another question, or two other questions rather. One is, do we want to be a good Muslim or not? Because if we want to be a good Muslim, that means we want to follow, we have the desire to follow Islam according to the teachings of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which were revealed to him by Allah the Almighty. We must also bear in mind that the whole purpose of the advent of the promised Messiah والسلام, was to tell the world, because most of the Muslims themselves had started to cast doubts on Islam and took it to be a religion which was 1400 years old, maybe revealed for the Bedouins of Arabia, and they saw the language of the Quran and the metaphors of the Quran. They didn't see them as metaphors, they took them as literal descriptions of things, and they thought, this is something very, very old, and maybe Islam is not for the modern man. So the sole purpose of the advent of the Prophet ﷺ was to tell the world, to reassure the Muslims that no, Islam is for every age, because there is absolutely no Shariat which is going to come after Islam, It has to be for every day and age, every time that is ever going to follow. And he explained Islam according to the need of the time of his times. And he didn't just leave us with that. Before he departed from this world, he left us with the institution of Khilafat Ahmadiyya, his successorship. So for any time to come, any time to follow, up to the last day of this world, there is going to be a representation of the promised Messiah, والسلام, which will enable us to understand Islam against the challenges of modernity. And as we all know, especially living here in the West, well, the whole world is westernized at the moment, so we all know the challenges are great. The challenges are immense. I mean, it's all about challenges these days, isn't it? So there had to be someone to explain to us in every day and age that this is how Islam is to be practiced now. A very quick example, Quran categorically says there is going to be absolutely no interest in any kind of trade or any kind of exchange or any kind of commercial affairs or financial affairs. And then when we come to this time, the one that we live in, we talk about mortgages. And then we have to see how it can be. If that is the only way of owning a house, what is to be done? It has to be presented to the Khalifatul Masih, and Hazrat Khalifatul Masih is going to tell us what exactly needs to be done. Just an example, just off the top of my head. So many more, of course, just one of them. So it's, so to be a good Muslim, to be able to understand Islam, anybody will have to have a leader, because the rest of the Muslims we see, all of the problems of the Muslim Ummah stem from the fact that no one sect, rather no even subsect, rather no even individual seems to be agreeing with the other. Hence, we see how the whole of the Ummah is now in a state where you can't even call it an Ummah. It's turned more into a crowd, unfortunately. We never say this with pleasure. We always say this with a very heavy heart. It's more of a crowd than a nation or an ummah, because everyone seems to have their opinion. Everyone seems to believe what they think is right, and they can interpret Islam the way they like. Hence, we see a reputation. Hence, we see history repeating itself. Hence, we see modern Muslim moving away from Islam, seeing it as something which is backward and something which cannot be practiced, except for Ahmadis. So like it or not, but it is only the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat that has a leader, and who we believe is divinely appointed by Allah the Almighty. So the only one place where you can have a leadership, where you can actually function as an ummah and function as a Jamaat and streamline all your efforts towards the propagation of Islam, it cannot be streamlined unless you have that focal point at the end, which you call Khilafat Ahmadiyya, the nucleus. So to be a good Muslim, we will need Khilafat. So we need Khilafat. That is the answer to the first question. The second question that entails, when you say, do we need Khilafat or does Khilafat need us? It's exactly the same as asking an ill person, does that ill person need a doctor or does the doctor need him? Of course, it's all of us who need doctors, and it's all of us who need to go to doctors from time to time. The doctor is there to diagnose and to treat and to prescribe medicines, etc. But it's in the first place, it's us. Now, when in the Holy Quran, Allah the Almighty, when He describes the duties of a prophet, He says, يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. He purifies them. So for us, living in this world, surrounded by ailments, literally, it's become very easy to understand with this coronavirus going around the world. So it's not a concept which only maybe people in England can understand and the ones in the USA cannot. We've all seen how we all felt vulnerable and how we all felt the need to stay away from the virus that could be anywhere in the air. We live in an exactly same society, spiritually speaking and morally speaking, with so many vices around us, so many viruses around us to attack our spirituality, to attack our belief. So in such a time, we would need something that could cleanse our hearts and cleanse our minds amidst the very challenging situation that we live in, where there is so much that can attack us, let alone all immorality and everything. Let's put all of that aside. Let's just keep a prayer of the promised Messiah ﷺ in mind and how important it is. When the Holy Prophet, when the promised Messiah ﷺ, he prayed for his children, but of course we take it for his spiritual progeny as well. He said, "Aya ho inki peshani pe iqbal, na ave inke ghar tak robe dajjal." Oh Allah, may they never become overwhelmed or impressed or influenced by the Dajjal. So when we see so much technological advancement, when we see so much advancement in medical sciences, when we see so much advancement in literally everything around us, we tend to think it's man-made and man is amazing. And maybe there is no God, because if man can do all of this, then there might as well just not be a God. So amidst all of this, that is where we need Khilafat. Now, and Sadasab, I wouldn't be mind if you wanted to be told when you want me to finish. So now when we said, like I said, like it or not, it's only Jamaat Ahmadiyya in the world that has a Khalifa. There have been attempts. It's not that people have not attempted. In the 1920s, there was a very strong movement with all Indian Muslims behind it, majority of the Indian Muslims behind it, to establish Khilafat, because the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman Caliphate was literally crumbling, falling apart. And Indian Muslims took it as an opportunity to jump on the bandwagon and say, oh, we want to save Khilafat because Khilafat is very precious to us and it's this and it's that. So we want the Ottoman Caliph to remain in place. We had delegates from the Khilafat movement, as they called it, traveling all the way to London to speak to the Prime Minister and have a discussion with him to see how Caliphate could be saved. They couldn't save it. Despite all of that rallying and despite all of that mobilization, they were unable to save the Caliphate because it was man-made, because it wasn't made by God. Despite the treasures, the military forces, and all sorts of facilities that behind a big kingdom, the Ottoman kingdom, they could not save Khilafat. Neither could the political mobilization of India. Then a very recent example that we see in very recent days, and all of us here, I think, we witnessed that period, where a Khalifa was installed in the name of Khilafat, not a Khalifa, but in the name of Khilafat, and with the title of Khalifa. They tried to install a Khalifa. Look what happened. They came with temporal power. We get this question asked as Ahmadis. If Khalifatul Masih is a Khalifa, where is his kingdom and where is his territory and where is the land that he's meant to be ruling? Well, one, that is not a prerequisite. One, that is not something essential that a Khalifa has to have. But that's a totally other discussion. But we saw the terrorist caliphate come to emerge, come to power, and crumble. And it went right parallel with Khilafat Ahmadiyya. Unharmed went Khilafat Ahmadiyya, still goes on, will go on. But they came with territories, they came with temporal powers, they came with military again, they came with their militia, they came with the power of the oil, they came with everything that you can imagine in this world as a worldly power, yet could not survive. Why? Because it was a human attempt, and Khilafat is not something that can be installed or established by humans themselves. We'll just quickly do it in fast forward from history coming into the current age and current times. We start from a time, because it's very interesting to note, although historians miss it out, and it's a great injustice that they do. Even the likes of Thomas Arnold, who were very good friends of the personal acquaintances of Hazrat Muslim Maud, yet when they speak about Islamic Caliphate, they just miss out the MTA Caliphate. They come all the way up to the Ottoman Caliphate. They come all the way up to 1924 when the Ottoman Caliphate was abolished, but they never bother to talk about another caliphate, which was running parallel to the Ottoman Caliphate for 16 long years, a decade and a half. Why? It's interesting to note. Future historians will definitely note it, inshallah. But it's interesting to note that Ottoman Caliphate was a kingdom, a huge kingdom. And the Ahmadiyya Caliphate was a caliphate which was a caliph who lived, a Khalifa who lived in the tiny small town of Qadian in a house built of mud and bricks. And that is where he was, with limited, very, very limited resources. A very simple life. No land, no temporal power, no armies, no finances. The only finance was the little subscription, the little chanda that would come from the members of the Jamaat, and that was it. So maybe that is why they failed to mention, because obviously, when you look at the balance, well, the Ottomans were a kingdom, and the Ahmadiyya Caliphate for them was something very, very negligible. Like I said, we'll go through and fast forward. So let's see what happens. As soon as the Ahmadiyya Caliphate is established in 1908, May 1908, in July, just 3 months after that, the Turks, the Young Turk movement, as it was called, the ones that revolted against the Ottoman Sultan or the Ottoman Caliph and wanted to abolish him and wanted to topple him, they come into full force and they want him to withdraw. And they want him to step down. They did not. They said, we don't opt for Khilafat. We want it to finish because it's just doing no good to us. And that is when he became only a constitutional monarch, 1908, 3 months after the establishment of the Ahmadiyya Caliphate. Ahmadiyya Caliphate starts with Hazrat Hakim Maulvi Nuruddin Razillah Ta'ala. The first task that he assigns is the translation of the Holy Quran. And that, within his lifetime, by 1912, the translation was done. It was complete by Maulvi Muhammad Ali Sahib. Only footnotes were left, which he managed to complete after the split. But the whole of the work was funded by Hazrat Khilafat al-Masih, was funded by Khilafat Ahmadiyya, and it happened under the auspices of the Khilafat Ahmadiyya. And then starts the time of Hazrat Muslim Maud Razillah Ta'ala Anhu, where he starts publishing in parts the commentary of the Holy Quran as well. This happens from 1908 to 1912, in the time of the first Khalifa, Hazrat Maulvi Nuruddin Razillah Ta'ala Anhu. In the 6 centuries of the Ottoman Empire, the Muslim Empire, the Muslim Caliphate as they called it, not one single translation of the Holy Quran was done in any language, not even in Turkish. Isn't it surprising? Isn't it astonishing? I see it, and I'm sure you'll all agree with me, that it was a task that Allah the Almighty had saved for Khilafat Ahmadiyya to emerge and do it. In 1913, we see the first mission, 12 rather, I would say, just as Fateh Muhammad Sahib Razillah Ta'ala Anhu was sent over to Britain. We see that a mission is established in London, in the heart of the world at that time, England, the British Empire being the biggest empire, and London being the capital. London was seen as the capital of the world. So a mission is established in London. No other community, no other Muslim community had been able to do that. I say that with all responsibility. I take responsibility of this when I say this. You had the king of Persia. You had the Ottoman Empire. You had the princely states, the rich, wealthy princely states like Bhopal and Awadh, who had enough, more than enough wealth to establish a mission in the West. They could not. They could, but they could not. Again, something that was saved for Khilafat Ahmadiyya to emerge at its time, as it was set by Allah the Almighty, and to do all of this. In 1924, as Muslim Maud Razillah Ta'ala Anhu, the second Khalifa, may Allah be pleased with him, travels to London for the conference and decides that he will lay the foundation stone of a mosque in the land that had already been bought in 1920. The funds were collected by Ahmadi women of India, who had the only savings they had were the little pocket money that they got from their husbands or from their guardians, so their fathers. That is all they had. And we must remember that, not all Ahmadis were very rich. The majority of them were actually underprivileged people, or average people living on the bread and butter line. And it was these savings of those women that they donated for the cause to build a mosque in London. And as Muslim Maud said, I want this task to be carried out exclusively by women. So they are donating whatever they have, whatever little savings they have, bit by bit by bit by bit. And in 1924, we see that Hazrat Muslim Maud, with those savings put all together, was able to lay the foundation of the first ever mosque in London. We must also remember that there was a London Mosque Fund, which was established in 1910 by the non-Ahmadi Muslims. And it had, very great names as trustees. Sayyid Ameer Ali, a very well-known name, a very eminent Muslim name in the British Muslim setup of that time. So he had set up with his associates, he had set up a London Mosque Fund. They wanted to build a mosque in London. They had a donation of £1,000 from the King of Persia. They had a donation of £1,000 from the Ottoman Caliph, just £1,000. It's a lot of money, but it's kings donating it. We must bear that in mind. They had £5,000 from the Begum of Bhopal, and they had another £2,000 which was donated from here and there. They had £9,000 sitting in their accounts, but were not able to build a mosque in London. Yet the savings of poor women of India, initiated by Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, were able to erect the first ever mosque in London. So there's so many things. We keep moving on. 1934, well, amazing. Just look at how Khilafat MTA works and just see how the hand of Allah the Almighty is always been behind it. You see goons and you see henchmen from the Majlis Ihrar, the opposition, the opponents of the Jamaat, rallying into Qadian. Very quickly, I must tell you, there was a lot of jealousy that had been brewing. Any trial that has faced the Jamaat, we must always bear in mind, you track it down, you trace it down, you try and diagnose, the roots go into jealousy. Every time, today, yesterday, the day before, the year before, the century before, every trial that the Jamaat has faced, you will always find the roots deep dug into jealousy. There was a big jealousy behind it because, in the early 1930s, there was this All India Kashmir Committee, which was established for the rights of the Kashmiri Muslims. And Hazrat Muslim Maud was unanimously elected as the president of the committee. The work that Hazrat Mirza Bashiruddin Mahmud Sahib, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, the work that Khilafat MTA was able to do, no other Indian leader had been able to do it. No other Indian leader had been able to do it. Again, I say this, I take all responsibility when I say that. With one single click of a finger of Hazrat Muslim Maud, the whole of India, Ahmadi or non-Ahmadi Muslims, all of them would unite for a Kashmir Day. Every city would hold a Kashmir Day on that day. With again just one single demand of the Hazrat Muslim Maud of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih for Chanda to donate for the Kashmiri Muslims, and every Muslim would feel proud in donating for the cause. Now, this was a shock for the Muslims, and they just saw it as, what is going on? I mean, this is an extremely powerful man, and this is an extremely powerful Jamaat. And because they are very, prone to thinking and very used to thinking in political terms, they saw it as a threat. So they said, we want Mirza Bashiruddin Mahmud to step down. May Allah be pleased with him. And he did. And from that time, and that is on record, and I quote Aisha Jalal from her book, Self and Sovereignty, an established historian, South Asianist. She says, as soon as Mirza Bashiruddin Mahmud Ahmad stepped down, Iqbal was elected the president, Sir Muhammad Iqbal. Anything to do with Kashmiri Muslim rights aside, he was not even successfully able to call a single meeting of the committee, working committee only, 4 or 5 people. And it all just fell apart. And then, so it was this jealousy that brought the Ahrar, because they were the main opponents at that time, into Qadian, claiming that we're going to just basically raise it down. That we're just going to raise it. It's not going to exist anymore. Qadian is going to be finished. We will ensure that Qadian does not exist. And there will be absolutely no one who will ever even remember that there used to be a Mirza Ghulam Qadiani, or there used to be a Mirza Bashiruddin Mahmud Ahmad. Hazrat Muslim Maud said, all right, okay. And the Jamaat wanted to know what actually is the reaction of Khilafat al-Masih. First, Khilafat al-Masih said, let them make their claims. Allah the Almighty has told me. He has lodged this idea in my heart that these people, in reply to these people who say that Qadian will not remain, I tell them that Allah has told me a scheme which will enable Qadian to become the center of a worldwide center of Islamic propagation, a worldwide mission of Islamic propagation, of the propagation of Islam. And that is Tehreek Jadid. And that is where it all started. Not only is Qadian there, it's very much known. I mean, a town which was never known by anyone, it's still there, very well known now, mashallah. And the mission has spread to all parts of the world. We now come to the time that we've all witnessed. We see a Khalifa, installing himself as Khalifa, and we see his supporters, with all those guns and everything holding. We can never forget, our children even can never forget the horrendous images that they've seen on news channels, where you see people with guns and missiles and all sorts of, rocket launchers and whatnot, walking all over the place, terrorizing everyone. He calls himself Khalifa. He gets a bunch of followers. And you see, in the name of Islamic State and in the name of Islamic Caliphate, we can never forget the type of terror that was created all around the world. And that was a time where, again, Khilafat Ahmadiyya had not only outlived the Ottoman Caliphate, it had been successfully functional for a whole century before this new caliphate emerges. Khilafat Ahmadiyya has been successfully moving, and when I say moving, I mean taking the message of Islam to every part of the world. It has been very much there, it has been very much functional, it has been very much successful. And then comes this new so-called caliphate, terrorizes the whole world, blemishes the name of Islam as much as it could, makes Islam and terrorism two synonyms of, for the same meaning of the same word, and eventually disappears. But that is not all. And Khilafat Ahmadiyya outlives it again. It's very faith-inspiring for anyone. I put my Ahmadiyya aside for a second, although it's very difficult to do so. I put it aside for a second. I swear it is success of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat. Ask anyone. Now, it's not only that. For that span of 5-6 years, let's see what happened. It's very interesting. It's a matter of going again back into that decade where we had all of this going on and just having a look at the newspapers. You see a news saying, you see a video on YouTube where they're holding a Christian journalist or a Christian person and saying, we're going to behead him because he's a Christian. So we're telling you we're going to do that. Around the same time, you have Khalifatul Masih, the fifth, may Allah be his helper and may Allah strengthen his hand, opening the Mary Mosque in Galway in Ireland and telling people that we've named it the Mary Mosque so that we can tell you how much we revere and how much respect we have for Hazrat Maryam alayhi salam, the mother of Jesus Christ alayhi salam. Isn't it amazing? Isn't it surprising? In another year, they had a Japanese journalist held hostage and showed him on the video on a video in YouTube and said, "Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. We've got this Japanese journalist here." Around the same time, just a month after or before that, but it's quite close, and it's astonishing, the parallels, not the parallels, how things go side by side. You have Hazrat Khalifatul Masih talking to Japanese people in Japan, directly addressing them, telling them, you have seen the atrocities of war. firsthand. Nobody else more than you can understand what war actually means and what war actually would mean if it's going to be a nuclear war, because Japan is the only country that had actually witnessed it themselves. Not only witnessed, had went through it, suffered it. They still are suffering it. And we have Hazrat Khalifatul Masih telling them, you are first-hand witnesses of it. You've experienced it. You're victims, actually. Only you can understand best. And only you can play a great role in calling the world nations to the fact, to non-proliferation, and to obviously, non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, etc., etc. So it's just amazing. I mean, how it has all worked. So on the one hand, we have a caliphate in the name of caliphate, terrorizing the whole world. On the other hand, we have Khilafat Ahmadiyya that was established in 1908, has been fully operational and functional ever since, has done wonders, has done miraculously astonishing work around the world. It is astonishing. When you talk to people, you tell them, oh, we've got 50 hospitals in Africa, and they turn around and say, only 50. Well, Seventh-day Adventists have 700. And yet they don't boast it off like that. So why are they so proud of it? What they don't understand is, it's that little bit of contribution from members of the Jamaat that is used for all of these humanitarian projects. So I think I've kind of probably maybe gone beyond my time. So I think I'd like to conclude here by saying that something which has such deep roots in such rich soil is something that is very, very secure, is something that provides security, is something that provides shelter, and is something that cannot be damaged by a single attack with an axe or with anything. With time, the trunk actually of a tree gets very, very strong and very, very, it's indestructible, unless, so it's shelter, it's security. Things fall on it. People sometimes maybe try to damage it. They can't really damage it. It's got really very strong roots. Nobody ever, because they've tried it in the past. We've got 1934, we've got 19 when the Iraq came and said we're going to finish it. We have 1953, when the persecution in Pakistan started. We were 1974, they unanimously decide, kick them out of the pale of Islam. Well, you can't do that. So anyway, they made a decision. What happened? Nothing happened. The Jamaat, mashallah, has been able to progress ever since, has been progressing. 1984, they thought this is it. The Khalifa is going to be arrested in Pakistan. He will not be able to function as Khalifa al-Masih. And that is the end of the story. Well, it wasn't. We see that the Jamaat was to spread to all parts of the world in a very new way. The message of Islam was to get to all corners of it in a wonderful, amazingly wonderful way. So this tree that we know as Khilafat Ahmadiyya is one that provides us shelter, is one that provides us security, is one that we should be very confident about. Nothing can shake it, inshallah. Jazakumullah.
Jazakallah. President Saab, I have no issue if you can give him more time. From my time, I didn't have much to say anyway.
So I think I've run out of English vocabulary now. I've used all the words I know.
Now you can speak in Urdu, we can understand it.
As you say, yes, I'm happy to say if you want, but yeah, as you like.
Amir Sab, there will be time for questions and answers,
Okay.
which ask someone.
Okay, Jazakallah. Next is blessing of next is the blessing of Khilafat, Ibrahim Chaudhary, some moderating.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, respected. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad alayhi salam came into this world as the Messiah and the Imam Mahdi of our time. During his lifetime, we saw the manifestations of many miracles, such as the divine support against all odds and the destruction of his enemies. Before his demise, Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salam foretold a second manifestation of Khilafat, and he wrote, "A Khalifa is in actual fact a prophet's shadow," and further elaborated, Allah the Exalted planned Khilafat so that the world may never in any age be deprived of the blessings of prophethood. In Al-Wasiyat, Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salam explains how Khilafat is the divine grace that saves Islam from hypocrites and enemies. He writes, thus one who remains steadfast till the end witnesses this miracle of God. This is what happened at the time of Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu anhu, when the demise of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was considered untimely, and many an ignorant Bedouin turned apostate. The companions radhiyallahu anhum of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, too, stricken with grief, became like those who lose their senses. Then Allah raised Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu anhu and showed for the second time the manifestation of his power and saved Islam. So dear friends, since it is the Sunnatullah from time immemorial that God Almighty shows two manifestations so that the two false joys of the opponents be put to an end, it is not possible now that God should relinquish his Sunnah of old. That second manifestation cannot come unless I depart, but when I depart, God will send that second manifestation for you, which shall always stay with you, just as promised by God in Brahine Ahmadiyya. And this promise is not for my person, rather the promise is with reference to you. As God addressing me says, I shall make this Jamaat, who are your followers, prevail over others till the day of judgment. So truly Allah Ta'ala does put the false joys of the opponents to an end. We all remember in 2003, after the demise of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabi Rahimahullah Ta'ala, when this Jamaat was in a state of anxiety and fear. But Allah Ta'ala came to the aid of the Jamaat and appointed his next Khalifa. Let's watch this short clip of Sharif Odesab describe his experience, how Allah the Almighty guided him during that process.
The Secretary, Imam Saab, and the Sadr Ijlas, Shadr Hamidullah Sahib, and they start to read the rules, and in the end they ask who we want to nominate names. Okay, some people stop up and they start mention names. When they mention names, my heart's close and refuse. I told myself, why is this bad feeling? They are holy man, why is this feeling? Now it's not your aql because you didn't know the CV, who is this person? Something like another systems work now. Refuse. Someone mentioned same person I thought about him to nominate him Khalifa. And I ask myself, okay, raise your hand. This is the I feel like Falij. I can't move my hand, and his name fall down. Amir Saab, Germany, asked the Sadr Ijlas to ask him to stood up to see the face of those people, because we came from different countries, east, west, north, south. Okay, when they mentioned Masroor Ahmad, I'm looking, where is Masroor Ahmad? He was in my group in the end where we removed the shoes in the near the door, and he's crying. And when I saw him, he's the same person I saw him before. He came from his face, Noor. I say, this is the Khalifa.
In a Friday sermon, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Nasr al-Aziz recited Surah Al-Nur, Surah Al-Nur, verse 56 of the Holy Quran, which speaks about the divine blessing of Khilafat being granted to the true believers. Hazrat Hazur Anwar highlighted that the verse makes the blessings associated with Khilafat conditional to fulfilling certain responsibilities, such as worshipping God alone and spending in Allah's way, and unconditionally obeying the Holy Prophet of Islam, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hazur Anwar said, only if we truly seek to act upon the pledge we have made of giving precedence to faith over the world will we be the recipients of the rewards that Allah the Almighty has promised, and only then will we benefit from the blessing of Khilafat in the real sense. Hazrat Muslim Maud also commented on this verse in Tafsir Kabir and said, if Muslims do not show appreciation of Khilafat by giving unstinted support and obedience to their Khulafa, they will forfeit this great divine favor. I would like to bring in our first story of Asif Bhai. Many of us were blessed to hear beloved Hazur's remarks at UNESCO in 2019. Asif Bhai had the honor to be one of the organizers for the event. I would request him if he can please narrate some of the background details that many may not be aware that shows how true obedience and faith in Khilafat always prevails.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakumullah Muhtamid Sahib. Yes, when we started organizing the UNESCO event for the 2019 tour of Hazur and Tarbiyyat in France, Amir Sahib France told me that we should have an external event, not internal from a Jamaat perspective, but take Hazur outside from Jamaat. And the only institution that came into our minds were UNESCO, because it was the only UN-based institution that is headquartered in Paris. And I mentioned to Amir Sahib France that I'm going to write a letter to UNESCO and request UNESCO for letting us having a room in order for Hazur to deliver a keynote address over there. So I don't know what Amir Sahib France understand at that time, but he wrote down to Hazur that, Hazur, we got the UNESCO done. And Hazur replied the next day in a way that he's accepting the invitation, saying, "Theek hai, main aa jaunga," saying about the UNESCO that he's going to be present and going to deliver an address to the UNESCO. So when Amir Sahib France told me that, the very next day, I received an email from UNESCO stating that, in fact, we refuse you and we refuse your application due to some internal circumstances. And we were really, really much worried about how we're going to deal with this, because Hazur already accepted it, and we have nothing at the end of the day. And we start looking for alternative options and all that, and nothing happened. But one day, a person that I didn't see for at least 10 years, came to me and he said, there is this ambassador, this Mali ambassador, he wants to meet you first time tomorrow morning in order for you to do a conference. And I didn't even know where was the conference. And I went the next day to the Mali ambassador office. And he spoke to me about this conference. And at the end, I wondered to this ambassador, to the ambassador, I said, but where is this conference is going to take place? And this ambassador told me at the UNESCO. So and that was just few days before Hazur has to come. And I still don't have any hall booked at that time. And I asked him to do the biggest favor of mine. So I run down the stairs, I pick up a brochure with the picture of Hazur, and I showed him a picture of Hazur. I said, I really need to take our Khalifa to the UNESCO. And watching these pictures of Hazur, he said, this looks like a wise man. I don't know who he is exactly, but I will make sure that this person will address in the UNESCO at the date that you wanted. The next day, alhamdulillah, we not only get the key of the room, but we also got confirmation, and Hazur could actually deliver his keynote address. And that was an example of obedience to Khilafat, because right when Hazur says something, yes, ji main aunga, I mean, angels are already working for this wish to be accepted.
Jazakumullah Asif Bhai for sharing that powerful incident. This goes to show how Khilafat is truly a divine institution, and how Allah the Almighty always comes to help his chosen ones. We are witness to the fact that these blessings have continued during this time of Khilafat. In the next clip, we can see how the prayers of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Ayyadallah bin al-Aziz saved an entire island from being wiped out by a tsunami.
फिजी में हम दौरे पे गए तो वहाँ एक दिन सुबह सुबह फजर की नमाज से पहले पाकिस्तान से फ़ोन आए नादर साहब वाला के और खबरें आ रही थी बीबीसी में कि बड़ा शदीद सुनामी आ रहा है और फिजी को अपनी लपेट में ले लेगा। बड़ी घबराहट का इजहार था, हर तरफ से मुख्तलिफ अजीज़ों के फ़ोन आने लगे। नमाज का वक्त था, हम मस्जिद चले गए अपनी रिहाइश से। मस्जिद में नमाज से पहले मैंने सब नमाजियों को कहा कि नमाज में हम सजदे में इस तूफ़ान का रुख फेरने के लिए दुआ करेंगे। मैं दुआ करूँगा, आप भी मेरे साथ शामिल हों। और दुआ की, अल्लाह ताला ने वहीं तस्कीन के सामान पैदा फरमा दिए। वापस आए तो पता लगा वो तूफ़ान का रुख दूसरी तरफ चला गया। तो ये है अल्लाह ताला की कुदरत कि ताकतें, दुनियावी ताकतें इस तूफ़ान को नहीं रोक सकती, लेकिन अल्लाह ताला जब चाहता है अपने बंदों की दुआएं कबूल करता है। जो खालिस उसको मानने वाले हैं, उसकी इबादत करने वाले हैं, उनकी सुनता है और उन दुआओं से फिर बारिशें भी नाज़िल फरमाता है, तूफ़ानों के रुख भी फेरता है, बाकी मसाइब से भी निजात देता है।
In this clip, beloved Hazur said, while on tour in Fiji, a severe tsunami was headed for Fiji that would cause devastation. This caused great concern among members. Before prayer, I announced to all worshippers that we would pray to Allah that He may divert the tsunami. Immediately, Allah the Almighty bestowed tranquility. After we came back from prayer, the tsunami had been diverted. These are signs given to prove the truthfulness of the Prophet's Messiah ﷺ and his Khulafa. But as Ahmadi Muslims, we can always attest to the fulfillment of these signs on a daily basis. I would like to now bring in Rahman Bhai and ask if he can share his experience with Khilafat and how Hazur Anwar's prayers were answered during his low time in school.
Assalamu alaikum. So my low time in school actually ranged from year 3 up until my 4th year in university. I continuously struggled, but in the spring of 2017, I had just finished my worst semester. I was placed on academic probation for the 3rd time, and I was on the verge of being suspended. And at this point, I had kind of made a commitment that if I can't figure this out in the fall of 2017, I'm just going to quit school and figure something else out. Fortunately for me, my family had planned a trip to the UK in which we were meeting our beloved Hazur. And during this mulaqat, I mentioned to Hazur that, Hazur, I'm kind of struggling in school. If you could please just pray for me. And Hazur said a short prayer. And in that moment, I didn't really make much of it. But when my semester started in fall, I noticed certain friends that I used to hang around and a certain company I was in, I started to distance myself from, and I also committed to attending class more. And from that point forward, I was able to get almost straight A's for the next 2 years, graduate, and alhamdulillah, get into law school over here in Houston. And there's no doubt in my mind that this was a result of Hazur's prayers. I was, and before that mulaqat, and even after that mulaqat, I felt kind of hopeless when it came to academics. But when I got into law school and everything happened, and there's people in the Jamaat who were helping me, I realized this is all the success, everything that's come is a direct result of Hazur's prayers and a direct result of following Hazur as our Khalifa.
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah Rahman Bhai for sharing that. Our next incident shows that not only do we see the love of Khilafat in our hearts, but how much love Khalifatul Masih has for each and every member of the Jamaat. As Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Salih Rahimahullah Ta'ala once said, the Khalifa of the time and the Jamaat are two names of the same entity. Let's take a look at our next clip expressing this unique bond of love.
Best man. And I love you.
Jazakallah. Okay, Allah Ta'ala bless you. And I love you too. मैं तो हर अहमदी से, हर मुखलिस अहमदी से जब वो इखलास से आता है, मिलता है, बैठता है, उसको देखता हूँ तो मुस्कुराता हूँ. मैं तो आपको देख के भी मुस्कुरा रहा हूँ. और आपके लिए मेरे वही जज्बात हैं जो अफ्रीकन के लिए हैं, वही जज्बात मेरे यूरोपियन के लिए हैं. एक मुखलिस अहमदी, चाहे वो यूरोपियन है, वो चाहे अफ्रीकन है, चाहे एशियन है, चाहे अरब है या साउथ अमेरिका का है, मेरे लिए तो सब बराबर हैं.
निकलती है दिलों से ये दुआ या रब हमेशा ही कि इखलासो वफा दिल में हमारे हो खिलाफत से.
In this clip, beloved Hazur said, I smile at every sincere Ahmadi, wherever they come from, and see me. I'm also smiling upon seeing all of you. Certainly, I have the same emotion of love as I have for the Africans, and those are the same feelings I have for Europeans. Every sincere Ahmadi, whether they're European, Africans, Asian, Arab, or from South America, or from anywhere, they're all equal in my eyes. Ismail Bhai converted to Ahmadiyyat in 2016. He had the honor to meet beloved Hazur in 2019 in a group mulaqat. I would request Ismail Bhai if you can share with us how Hazur showed his love and care towards you during that mulaqat.
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, I was blessed with the opportunity to meet with Hazur in the group mulaqat in London. I believe it was 2019. Jalsa. And before that, like months before that, there was these brothers from Ghana in Nigeria who came and told me that, you know, they basically seen something in me, like some light or whatever in me, and they wanted me to study and come over to Ghana and study for 3 years. But they said, you know, we had to present it to Hazur. So that time came when I went to London. We had the group Malakat. And when I presented it to Hazur, he asked me my age. And I told him I think I was 27 at the time. I'm 30 now, but I told him my age. And he told me I was too old for that. You know, being as though people, I think imams and stuff go straight out of high school and they study for 7 years. So I was already past that age. So, you know, I was kind of like discouraged. I was kind of like, you know, he basically told me like I was too old. And I kind of like started to sit down. And he told me, like he lovingly looked at me and told me to stay with him for 6 months. And like, it was just an overwhelming and humbling experience for me. And I'll never forget it.
Jazakumullah, Ismail Bhai, that's very heartwarming indeed. As Ahmadis, not only does Hazur love us, but our hearts are filled with love for him. I would like to bring in Faris, a 16-year-old Khadim who, by the grace of Allah, has been able to write a letter to Hazur every single day for some time now. Faris, I would like to ask you, what motivates you to write to Hazur every day?
Assalamu alaikum, Ibrahim Bhai. So what motivates me is that when you love someone, you would want to meet them every day. But unfortunately, we can't meet Hazur every day, but we can write a letter to him every day. And so I will write to Hazur very frequently, and now also write every day. It's been a while now, but on Jummah I would write to him Jummah Mubarak. But you know, I would never get a reply of that Jummah Mubarak, you know, like a Khair Mubarak. And I never got a reply for every single letter. But you know, I was never discouraged, because to me it was that, you know, Hazur's reading my letter is more than enough for me. And so when Eid came, I wrote to beloved Hazur, Eid Mubarak. And not long after, I received a letter from Hazur saying, Eid Mubarak to you as well. And this really made me so happy. And it also shows that one has to be patient and be steadfast. For if you truly love Hazur, you would keep on showing that love and keeping in contact with Hazur. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah, Faris, may Allah bless you. And may, you know, everybody is able to benefit from writing a letter to Hazur regularly to build a personal connection with him. Many of us know that the love is not a one-sided ordeal. Love is a two-way street. These two stories of Ismail Bhai and Faris Bhai are just one of millions of stories. As Ahmadi Muslims, our love must be expressed through our complete obedience to Khalifatul Masih. In the next clip, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabi Rahimahullah Ta'ala explains the true meaning of fulfillment of Bai'at and how after entering into this pledge, you must obey every decision of the Khalifa without expressing any doubt. Let's take a look.
इस तरह खुदा अपने निशान जाहिर करता है, फिर क्यों शकूक और वहमों में मुब्तला होकर तुम अपनी आकबत के दरपे होते हो? लेकिन अगर खालिस हो अपने अहद बैत में और खुदा की तईदें तुम्हें यकीन दिला रही हैं कि ये दुरुस्त फैसला था बैत का, तो फिर अपने तर्ज अमल में वो अदब इख्तियार करो जो लाजिम है मेरे जैसे कमज़ोर इंसान के लिए नहीं, बल्कि नफ़्ख़ रूह के तकाजे की वजह से। क्योंकि जिस खलीफा को खुदा बनाता है, जो उसके मसनद तक बैठता है, वो उसी नफ़्ख़ रूह से बरकत पाता है। नई नफ़्ख़ रूह पर नहीं है, लेकिन उसी नफ़्ख़ रूह से बरकत पाता है। इसलिए इस मकाम को कभी पेश नज़र से हटाना नहीं, और ज़ाती तौर पर मैं अपने आप को जो समझता हूँ मुझे बेहतर पता है। मैं नहायत नाकारा इंसान हूँ, इल्मी लिहाज से कमज़ोर, बसा औक़ात इतनी गलतियाँ करता हूँ कि सारे खुलफा ने मिलकर जो ज़ाहिरी उलूम की गलतियाँ हैं, मैं फिर बता रहा हूँ ज़ाहिरी उलूम की, वो इतनी नहीं की होंगी जितनी मैं अकेला ही कर चुका हूँ अब तक। फिर भी अल्लाह बर्दाश्त फरमा रहा है। वो जानता है कि ये गलतियाँ बशरी कमज़ोरियाँ हैं। बचपन के गलत स्कूलिंग के नतीजे में मेरी तरबियत अल्लाह और तरह फरमा रहा था। स्कूल के में पढ़ने वाले मौलवी बन रहे थे, वो और तरह बन रहे थे। ज़ाहिरी उलूम पर जो उनको दस्तरस हुई वो मुझे नसीब नहीं हुई, मैं जानता हूँ, मगर अगर वो होती तो ये ना होता जो अब नसीब है। इसलिए जिन तकाज़ों के पेश नज़र अल्लाह मुझे तैयार कर रहा था, उनमें इन गलतियों का शामिल होना एक लाजमी हिस्सा है। इसलिए इन पर कोई गलत नतीजे ना निकालें, मगर खुदा की ताईद बहरहाल मेरे साथ है, रहेगी, और हर खलीफा के साथ जब तक मसीह मौद अलैहिस्सलाम के आला मकासद पूरे नहीं होते इसी तरह जारी रहेगी। और जो शख्स उससे ताल्लुक़ काटेगा उसका खुदा से ताल्लुक़ काटा जाएगा, इस बात में कोई शक नहीं है। अल्लाह हमें तौफीक अता फरमाए कि अपने वफा के तकाज़ों को कमा हक़ को बयान करें।
As we were not able to have the English captions, we have the full translation here, which I will read out. Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabi Rahimahullah Ta'ala said, "Why ruin your end by falling into suspicions? If you're sincere in your covenant of Bai'at and the support of God is increasing you in certainty that your decision to give Bai'at was correct, then adopt that respect in your behavior that is necessary, not for a humble person like myself, but for the person who Allah has breathed his spirit into. The Khalifa who is made by God gains blessings from the spirit of God being breathed into him that was breathed into those before him. Never forget the status. I know myself better than anyone else. I'm a very weak person. Sometimes I make so many mistakes in the fields of secular knowledge that perhaps all previous Khulafa combined have not made so many mistakes in secular knowledge. Still, Allah tolerates it because He knows that these mistakes are human weaknesses because of schooling in childhood. Allah was fostering me in a different way, and the people studying in school were being prepared in a different way. But if that had not happened, then the blessings that are here now would not have happened. The purposes for which Allah was preparing me, it was inevitable that these mistakes of mine be a part of it. So don't draw any wrong conclusions from this. But the support of God is with me and will remain with me, and it will remain and continue with every Khalifa until the lofty objectives of the mission of the promised Messiah ﷺ are not achieved. Whoever breaks his connection with the Khalifa, his connection with God will be cut. There's no doubt in this. Khilafat Ahmadiyya is truly the arc of Islam today. Hazrat Muslim Maud Radhiyallahu Anhu explains in this next quote how no worldly power can cause harm to a divine institution of Khilafat. Hazrat Muslim Maud Radhiyallahu Anhu states, मगर सिलसिला अहमदिया खुदा ताला के हाथ का लगाया हुआ पौधा है जिसे कोई तबाह नहीं कर सकता। ये सिलसिला एक चट्टान है जो उस पर गिरेगा वो पाश पाश हो जाएगा, और जो इसको मिटाना चाहेगा वो खुद मिट जाएगा, और कोई शख्स भी ख्वाह उसकी पशपना अहरारी हो या पैगामी हो, उसको नुकसान पहुंचाने में कामयाब नहीं होगा। उसको नुकसान पहुंचाने का इरादा करने वाले जलील और ख्वार होंगे और क़यामत तक ज़िल्लत और रुसवाई में मुब्तला रहेंगे। He further stated in Anwarul Ulum, बस मैं ऐसे शख्स को जिसको खुदा ताला खलीफा सालिस बनाए अभी इससे बशारत देता हूँ कि अगर वो खुदा ताला पर ईमान लाकर खड़ा हो जाएगा तो मनान, वहाब और पैगामी क्या चीज़ हैं। अगर दुनिया की हुकूमतें भी इससे टक्कर लेंगी तो वो रेज़ा रेज़ा हो जाएंगी। जमात अहमदिया को हज़रत खलीफा अव्वल की औलाद से हरगिज़ कोई ताल्लुक़ नहीं। जमात अहमदिया को खुदा की खिलाफत से ताल्लुक़ है और खुदा की खिलाफत के आगे और पीछे लड़ेगी और दुनिया में किसी शरीर को जो कि खिलाफत के खिलाफ है, खिलाफत के करीब भी नहीं आने देगी। And the English translation of these two excerpts: the Ahmadiyya movement is a plant that has been sown by hand of God, which no one can destroy. This movement is a rock. Whoever falls on it will be broken into pieces. Whoever tries to obliterate it will be obliterated himself. Nobody, whether he is backed by those who are Ihrari or Peghami, will succeed in bringing any harm to it. Those who intend to harm this movement will be disgraced. Until the day of judgment, they will remain disgraced. Hazrat Muslim Maud Raziyallahu Anhu continues to say that I give you good news from now to the person who Allah will make the third Khalifa, that if he stands with faith in Allah, then what are Manan and Wahab? These were sons of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Awal, who opposed Hazrat Muslim Maud Raziyallahu Anhu. And who are those who are Peghami? Even if the governments of the world collide with him, they will be obliterated. The Ahmadiyya community is not at all connected with the children of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Awal. The Ahmadiyya community is connected with Khilafat. And if it will fight in front of and behind the Khilafat of God, it will not let any wicked person in the world that opposed to Khilafat come anywhere near Khilafat. May Allah Ta'ala bless us in truly understanding the purpose of our ba'ath. May we remain completely obedient to Nizam Khilafat and become true Sultan and Nasir of Khalifatul Masih. Ameen. In the end, Amir Sahib, we would like to show one last video with your permission. The National Tarbiyyat Department of Majlis Khuddamul Ahmadiyya started a campaign and asked Khuddam to share what does Khilafat mean to them. Alhamdulillah, we received an overwhelming response of Khuddam expressing their love for Khilafat, and we have tried to create a compilation of these responses. I request the team to please play.
दिलों में प्यार की खुशबू तो होठों पर दुआ
खिलाफत अहमदिया के साथ हमेशा वफा का ताल्लुक़ रखूँगा और बहैसियत खलीफतुल मसीह आपकी तमाम मारूफ हिदायत पर अमल करने की कोशिश करूँगा।
We asked our Khuddam, what does Khilafat mean to them? And this is what they had to say.
There is no life without Khilafat.
Khilafat has been a blessing and a guiding light throughout my life.
It's like a bright light guiding us in this world. We're so lucky to have it.
To me, Khilafat means peace of mind in an uncertain world.
For me, Khilafat is a bridge between me and Allah.
Khilafat is my guidance to Siratul Mustaqim.
Huzoor's immense light brings my heart extreme comfort.
Khilafat is a rope of Allah that has helped me find Him and establish a closer relationship with Him.
In my perspective, Khilafat is the biggest blessing for humankind.
Khilafat is a source of love, peace, and guidance for me.
There is no life without Khilafat.
For me, Khilafat is a source of brotherhood in my life.
Khilafat is the biggest blessing in my life.
A tree with a nice cool shade in a desert.
Khilafat nourishes me and enriches me as I move in life. There is no life without Khilafat.
Khilafat helps me have a stronger bond with Allah.
Khilafat is a blessing
for all mankind and a guardian for all the believers.
Khilafat has been a source of guidance throughout my life.
For me, Khilafat nourishes my mind and my faith.
Khilafat is the apple of my eye.
Khilafat is the biggest blessing in my life.
Allah says to hold fast altogether to the rope of Allah and be not divided. And to me, Allah has sent and He has cast down a rope from the heavens in the form of Khilafat.
Khilafat is a blessing for the world. Khilafat is a precious gift from Allah, and I love Khilafat. I love Khilafat, and there's no life without Khilafat.
Khilafat is divinely guided.
The more I write to Hazur, the less I worry.
Our Khilafat, your Khalifa, my Hazur, Inni Ma Ka Ya Masroor.
Khilafat means peace, love, security.
In this age, Khilafat is the rope of Allah for the Ummah.
Khilafat is the direct connection to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Islam.
There is no greater blessing in my life than Khilafat.
For me, Khilafat is one chance I got in my life.
For me, Khilafat means bringing everyone under one leadership.
Khilafat is the biggest blessing in my life.
For me, Khilafat is a respected leader.
Khilafat to me means spiritual guidance.
Khilafat to me is a favor from God.
To me, Khilafat means someone who prays for you even if you don't ask him to.
Khilafat is a gift from God.
Khilafat is my spiritual lifeline.
Khilafat to me means confidence.
Khilafat brings me closer to Allah Ta'ala.
To me, Khilafat means a stronger connection to Allah, and it also means peace.
Khilafat is a living spiritual connection I have that is always there to remind me that I need to do better day in, day out, spiritually and for mankind.
Hazur is the North Star of my life.
Khilafat is a very special blessing that only we have.
Khilafat is the biggest blessing in my life.
To me, Khilafat means unity and brotherhood.
Khilafat to me is a source of many blessings and a clear guidance in a chaotic world.
Khilafat has provided me with spiritual and worldly guidance.
Khilafat to me means striving to better oneself, to stay on the right path.
To me, Khilafat is the means through which one can develop a deeper connection with God Almighty.
Khilafat for me is the way to achieve nearness to Allah Almighty.
Khilafat gives me a sense of direction.
I love Khilafat because Khilafat loves me.
I love Khilafat because it brings me closer to Islam.
Khilafat helped me completely change my life for the better.
Khilafat is my shield that protects you.
Khilafat is my life and my guide.
That concludes our presentation.
Jazakallah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Sadr Sahib and Majlis Khuddamul for inviting me. We had wonderful program and highlighted by Asif Basit Sahib's speech of a blessing of Khilafat. And obviously the last part was very good and individual expression of pure love for Khilafat in their own words. And that is the main blessing of the Khilafat is that we see it in everyday life as has been described by these individuals. But still, how we can become the recipient of these blessings is only way to achieve this is to connect with the person, the Khalifatul Masih of the time. These blessings cannot be appreciated or recognized if we do not have a connection with the Khalifatul Masih and Khilafat Ahmadiyya. And its pure example is there are over 1.2 billion Muslims. They don't see these blessings, as I just mentioned in the keynote speech. They are blind. They have no insight or foresight. Even though these all things are happening in front of them, and they are seeing it and watching it and observing it for last 115 years, 114 years, but still they don't get it. So within our Jamaat, we should all be cognizant of the fact that we as an individual, as an Ahmadi, don't fall in that unfortunate group that in spite of the fact that we were born Ahmadi or converted to Ahmadiyya, and we still be not recognizing or not be a recipient of blessing of Khilafat. And the main thing to receive or recognize the blessing of Khilafat is to recognize the status of Khalifa, of Khilafat Ahmadiyya. As the verses read in early on tell that this is a favor of God will be given and bestowed to those people who are believers and do good deeds. And as long as we would be that a group of people, this favor will continue, inshallah. And we should pray for it. We should strive to be a group of those people that this Khilafat should continue among us. But for that, it is very important that we have a direct connection with Khilafat Ahmadiyya and Khalifatul Masih. These things don't happen in a vacuum. The lack of connection, the lack of bond creates all kinds of suspicions and misperceptions. You know, it is like having a town hall meeting to tell the virtues or the good things of parents, that of our parents. We don't need those meetings because that's the individual connection of every child with the father and the mother. That they have the love for their father and the mother, for their parents. And the same love should we have, or even more, for the Khalifatul Masih. And I'm not making it up because this is our condition of faith. For an Ahmadi who pledges and take a bath at the hand of Khalifatul Masih, the 10th bath, the condition of bath is in the verse, thus he or she shall enter into the band of brotherhood with this humble servant of God, pledging obedience to me in everything good for the sake of Allah, and remain faithful to it till the day of his or her death, that he or she shall exert such a high devotion in the observance of this bond as is not to be found in any other worldly relationships and connection demanding devoted dutifulness. So that is the pledge we take when we take a bath or renew our bath. So it behooves us that we should reflect upon our conduct and behavior in reference to our relationship with Khilafat Ahmadiyya. It is a pledge that we need to solemnly affirm. It is not some worldly connections or relationship. It is a spiritual and moral bond that we affirm with the head of the Ahmadiyya Jama'at, the Khalifatul Masih. I would like to take a couple of minutes to read some excerpts from the speeches of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih I and emphasize the importance and the status of Khilafat. Hazur say, Khalifatul Masih Awwal, I have God's promise that He would lend me His support. I have no need to call upon you to enter into a fresh covenant of Bai'at. You should carry out your original covenant, lest you should be involved in hypocrisy. If you perceive that I am in error in respect of something, you should try through prayers. If you perceive that I am in error in respect of something, you should try through prayers that I might be shown the right path, but do not imagine that you can teach me the true meanings of some verses of the Holy Quran or of some hadith or of some of the statements of Prophet Messiah alayhi salam. And then he says, I warn you that you will have to carry out my directions willingly or unwillingly. And in the end, you will have to affirm that you obey me willingly. Whether I tell you is for your whatever I tell you is for good, for your good. May Allah keep you and me firmly on the path of guidance, and may our end be good. Then he says, God Almighty of His grace saved you from disintegration after the death of the Prophet Messiah alayhi salam. By uniting you at my hands, then appreciate this divine bounty and do not indulge in useless discussions. I cannot understand what moral or spiritual benefit do you derive from them. God Almighty has made Khalifa, whom He willed, and He has made you acknowledge His authority. And He made you acknowledge His authority. It would be great folly on your part to take exceptions to this divine determination. I have told you repeatedly and have demonstrated it from the Holy Quran that it is not the part of man to establish a Khalifa. It is not the part of man to establish a Khalifa. It is the function of God Almighty. Those powerful words really state the status of the Khilafat Ahmadiyya. And our responsibility as an Ahmadi who had taken bath of Khalifa of the time that we do everything in our power to protect it and guard it. And how we can do it is to develop a personal bond and love with him. And instead of getting involved in petty discussions and correspondence on social medias about what Khalifa can or cannot do. If we have taken a bath, we should abide by it. We should make a firm pledge. And as been said in these words, that if anybody has an issue, then he should pray and write to Khalifatul Masih. But there is no place for a true Ahmadi to get involved in any kind of discussions or making some judgments. We have taken the bath and we should stay obedient to Khilafat Ahmadiyya. That's all I have to say.
Jazakallah, Amir Sab, can we start with some question and answer section now?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Mohtaram Tarbiyyat sir.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everybody. So, mashallah, we have about over close to 1,300 connections right now. So we have, so just bear with us as we get through a lot of questions, and we'll just try to, lump some of these questions. We did have also, I'll just share the instructions. If anyone has a question, you have two options. One, you can ask your questions in the QA box of Zoom. The other option is a live question. If you would like to ask a live question, please raise your hand. The admin team will ask you to turn your video on. If your video is on, the moderator will call your name and you will be unmuted to ask your question. Please note that in order to ask your question, you will need to turn your video on today. If there are Lajna members who may be asking a question, please use the QA box on Zoom. We will not be taking live questions from Lajna. Please keep your questions around the topic of Khilafat. There are some pre-submitted questions that we had received, and if we can maybe, Amir Saab, get started with that, if with your permission.
Yes, sir.
So the first question, maybe if I can ask Asif Saab if you can shed some light on this, is Hazur recently gave a sermon on how Hazrat Umar Raziyallahu anhu welcomed criticism and invited people to correct him, even with swords if necessary, if he ever made a mistake. How does this apply in Khilafat Ahmadiyya?
Well, to understand this, if my father told me that, feel free to come and correct me even with a sword, what would I do? Let's bring it down to the smaller unit before we take it out to the bigger, larger scale. What would I do? Would I ever in my life feel comfortable saying, okay, now because he's allowed, I'm going to take a sword and I'm going to fix him? I'll never do that, out of the love and the respect that I would have for my father. When we claim, like Respected Ameer Jama'at has just mentioned, we have to develop a love for Khilafat, which goes beyond the love that we have for our parents. When we're at that stage, we'll never ever be able to even imagine doing something like that. And why would one need to do that? When all of us, all Ahmadis, most of us here, and millions of us who are not here in this session today, when we've seen that Hazrat Khalifatul Masih is the kindest, most loving person in the world. If you see, if there is anything you note where you think you need to identify it, you can identify, you can write to him, you can tell him. Why think of the ultimate, because that is a way of expression. That is that is how Hazrat Umar Raziyallahu actually, it shows his piety, that he shows, I'm ready to take this even. But are we going to do that? Will we ever even think of doing that? Of course not. So it all again comes down to the relationship that we'd have, the relation that we have with Khalifatul Masih is such where we've taken bath, where we've pledged allegiance at his hand, and we've said that we'll always be ready to obey whatever you command us to do. The level of faith that, and again going back to Khalifatul Masih Awwal, Hazrat Hakim Maulvi Nuruddin Sahib Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu, he once stated on an occasion, although I believe that Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Sahib Qadiani has not brought a new Shariat, a new religion. But if he was to tell me that the Sharia of Islam has changed, I would be very happy to accept, because I can bear witness that he doesn't tell lies and he cannot make mistakes. He is divinely guided. So it all comes down to what kind of belief you have in Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, what kind of love you have for Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, and it's all down to that. So sometimes we can be given, I would take it as Hazrat Umar Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu's humility.
Also, if I may, the point we need to look at it, what was the conduct and behavior of Umar Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu at the time, in the time of Hazrat Abu Bakr's Khilafat?
Yes, absolutely.
How obediently he served him. And as mentioned in the khutbah, he was, known for his anger, right from his childhood. And he was, very emotional person. But again, when he took bath as Abu Bakr Radiyallahu Anhu, he was a completely changed person. He was the most faithful and the obedient of the servant of the Khilafat. And that one of the reasons Hazrat Abu Bakr named him for besides his love for Prophet ﷺ, nominated him for the Khilafat after him. I take that also in consideration.
Jazakallah, respected Asif Saab and Amir Saab. We'll take our first live question, and I'll request Fateen, please, if you can turn your video on and you can unmute and ask your question. Please be mindful of the time as we're trying to get through a lot of questions, and keep the question brief and concise. So Fateen Saab, if you want to ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum. I still cannot turn on my video.
Okay.
Yes, it says the host has disabled it.
Okay, we'll get your video on and then have you on, and then have you ask your question. So in the meantime, I'll have another question for Asif.
Yeah, I'm here.
Perfect. Jazakallah.
So in one of the Friday sermons, back in Lahore, I remember a saying of, I'm not sure if it's from one of the Khalifatul Masihs, but it was that in Urdu it was ke be-adab sabse pehle halak hota hai. So I was just trying to, if someone knows the reference for this, I would be really thankful.
Okay. Is that Amir Saab or?
Asif Basit Saab would have understanding being the.
I really wish I had references.
The point is that you said the be-adab sabse pehle halak hota hai.
Yep.
Okay. Do you have an issue with that? Obviously that's the question. So your understanding is different. Without reference, we cannot comment on it. And when none of the panelists know who's you're attributing and what's the context of it. So I think if we don't have the context and anything like that, but you just heard Khalifatul Masih Rabe about that you should do, what was the Urdu word? Ibrahim Saab talked about that aapko Khalifatul Khilafat ke saath muaddab hona chahiye. There's something like that.
Yes.
Did you hear that?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that, answered the question that you should be extremely respectful to the Khilafat and to the Khalifa. I mean, obviously you asked the question, so I would like to know what your thought process was.
Yes, I wanted to know the reference for this. So
Okay,
if anyone has the
no.
reference.
Maybe we can get Murabi Rizwan Saab to help us with that reference after.
Assalamu alaikum. I'll just look into it. I vaguely remember from Malfuzat. I'm just looking at my notes to see if I have a note of it.
Oh, it's talking about Masih Maud Islam.
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
So
yeah, I think I read it somewhere too.
You can send it to me afterwards as well.
Okay.
So we have a lot of questions coming in through the live chat box. So we'll take some of these questions. One of the questions says, are Khilafat and Khalifa one and the same, or is it possible to separate the institution of Khilafat from actions of a human Khalifa?
Basisa, please.
I mean, Khilafat, actually Khilafat is an institution. That is why Hazrat Promised Messiah والسلام, in Al-Wasiyat says that it is essential that I go so that you witness the second manifestation, i.e. Khilafat, in brackets, which will stay with you forever. So persons as in the roles of Khalifa keep coming and taking the institution forward. So Khilafat as an institution is there to stay, and then Allah the Almighty appoints people for that office. While they're in office, Khilafat and Khalifa cannot be two things. I mean, it's like asking whether a minister and his ministry can be separated. I mean, he is a minister because he's attached to the ministry, and the ministry is a ministry because it's being run by a minister. So while the person is in office, him and Khilafat and the Jamaat are the same, are meant to be the one and the same thing. Ameer Sahib.
Yeah, I agree. The Khilafat is the institution established after the passing of the Prophet. And the Khalifa, as I just mentioned, is the person that God chooses to function as the successor of the Prophet, to continue to the mission. It's just been said in Khalifa Rabi. There cannot be any difference or differentiation between the institution of the Khilafat and the person who is holding that title of Khalifa, because that's the God's choice and it cannot be separated. God cannot establish an institution and then put a person who is not fit for that institution and not completely in unison with that institution.
Jazakallah, Amir Sahib. There's another question that had come in is, in most cases of rape, there's no witness, to the point that even people living on the same house do not know what happened. How can a victim or rape produce for witness to get justice? If, Asif Saab, if you would like to comment on that.
Jazakumullah, that's quite right. I mean, it's quite, it would be very, very rare for such a victim to produce for witnesses. I think the question actually that people have in mind, and it's an intellectual discussion around this. It's a matter of Islamic jurisprudence. People have asked, people do ask, and I think they will continue to ask. What we need to bear in mind here is that whenever this question of Islamic jurisprudence pops up, it starts from a victim of rape. Would they be able to provide this? Would they be able to provide that? Would they be able to show this? Would they be able to show that? Nobody, or rarely ever does anybody try to go before that point, before you actually see somebody as a victim of rape. Like any other crime, let's start with an example of, say, you go to a doctor, you say, I've got tummy ache, I've got stomach ache, can you do something? They don't just write out a prescription. The first stage will always be diagnosis, before getting to a point where they can tell you, okay, this seems to be the problem, this is where you need to start. As soon as somebody approaches the authorities, and tells them, claims to be a victim of rape, they will have to establish the elements of rape before getting to this point to say, okay, now such and such person is a victim of rape. Let's see what can be done. In that, just imagine some XYZ goes to the authorities and says, oh, well, I am a victim of rape. What shall I do? Will the authorities not have to establish to see whether it was consensual or not? What actually had happened? Before getting to the point to say, all right, now established, yes, this is it. Now let's see what to do with the culprit. So we start the question halfway when there is a lot to be discussed before that. And that is establishing the elements of the crime, which happens in every crime, literally every crime. So that is where the first point to see, to examine for a judge or for the court would be to see that it was not consensual, and to establish, because it is, to see that it wasn't adultery, they will have to ask for 4 witnesses, which obviously is a prescribed way of investigation for adultery. Once that is ruled out, okay, it wasn't that, and once that is ruled out and seen that, all right, there are no 4 witnesses available, then they move on to all sorts of evidence that can be provided. But because Islam prescribes a had, which is a crime mentioned in the Holy Quran tells how to investigate, and the Holy Quran prescribes the punishment for that. You have to, first of all, see that it does not fall under the had. So as soon as you have established the fact that it does not fall under the had, the next thing is ta'zir. Had is a compulsory punishment, which you have to actually, a prescribed punishment by Allah. You cannot change. No judge, no Islamic court can ever change or say, all right, okay, maybe not 100 lashes, maybe 99, or because the crime is such and such, maybe not 100, 101. It has to be what it is prescribed as it is said in the Holy Quran. Once you establish that it doesn't fall under the had, the next step is ta'zir, where Islam provides discretion to the court to go through evidence, examine everything properly, investigate, and then get to a decision and see what kind of punishment needs to be enforced on or imposed on such and so on the culprit. So it is that, I mean, I do agree, everyone would agree, it would be very, very rare for somebody to provide, but that would be the first step where you have to see that. And then from there on, you move into investigating using all other means, modern means. It can be CCTV footage, it could be all sorts of medical examination, it could be DNA testing and everything. All of that would be acceptable as far as evidence is concerned. To establish whether that evidence is real or not, that is always going to be for the authorities to examine. And again, I must clarify, this is just theoretical when you talk about Islamic way of investigation. So when I mention this, I only mention this by way of a theoretical discussion in Islamic jurisprudence. However, whatever country we live in, it's the first thing for such a person is actually go to the authorities and seek help there.
And then, Jazakallah, Asif Sahab. The next question I see it's a live on the chat is, why did Khulafai Rashidin advise on choosing the next Khalifa while they were alive? Amir Sahab or Asif Sahab?
Ji, I think there is no prohibition in doing so. And we know that, in the early phase of Islam, dissension had already started. And there were so many problems. And, when Khulafa felt that, rather than leave them in a situation where the dissension just might, turn into have a snowball effect, that they thought of nominating or having 2-3 people nominated, or told people you can select people or elect people from out of these 2-3 people. Nomination of an individual, nomination of a group of people, and leaving it entirely up to the Jamaat to decide afterwards by way of mushawarat or shura. They're all acceptable ways of election. It just has to be seen. Whatever creates lesser unrest within the Jamaat.
Just to correct it, I think the question is not actually accurate, if I may say that, because Ahmad Sallallahu did not nominate anybody, number
Did
one.
not, absolutely.
Hazrat Abu Bakr did nominate, but Hazrat Umar made a committee of 6 people. That was not nomination. It was just like a shura, but I mean, a small committee, but you cannot say that Khalifatul Abu Bakr, as Umar, Hazrat Umar made a nomination. He did not. And so I think it should be corrected that it's not the case. It was different ways of doing it.
Jazakallah, Amir Sahib. Another question is, how can we improve our love for Khilafat?
Please.
How can we improve our love? How do we improve our love for our mother, for our father? I always bring that down, because when we say I love the Khalifa more than my mother and father, which we ideally should, so we have to come down to our mother and father. How do we do that? Do we sit and think, how do I improve it? Or are there certain factors that help us, help enhance the love that we have for our mother and father, or for other people that we love in this world? So I think it's basically like we've spoken earlier. I mean, in my humble, talk that I had, and myself, how he's explained it very well. It's actually knowing who the Khalifatul Masih is and what he actually stands for. If you see, if you love Islam, if you love the fact that you're a Muslim, and if you see a person being the sole defendant of the religion of Islam, or the faith of Islam on this earth, you will naturally feel a sense of connection. And the more you get connected, the more you get to see those works closely, you will develop that love in your heart for that person, because you need to understand what that person stands for. So it's always a matter of trying to understand. That is why Hazrat Sahib encourages students. You must have heard in many classes when he says you must listen to Friday sermons. It's not because he wants, he's saying about that himself. He's talking about Khalifatul Masih. So the more you listen, the more you find out, the more you learn, the more you fall in love with the person. The other thing is when you stay connected through letters, when you hear back from him, when you get loads of prayers, is only when you actually get to realize what a treasure it is, and the more you fall in love with them. So there can be different ways, of course, to improve that and to enhance that.
There's a question in the Q&A box. It says that it has been said that there's no Islam without Khilafat. Can you explain?
Basta, please.
Ji. Yes, there is no Islam without Khilafat, because Islam, every religion has to have a leader. So if there is no leader, it's really difficult for the religion to survive, because even all along in between the time when, after the end of the Khilafat-e-Rashida and the start of Khilafat-e-Ahmadiyya, in between whatever was there, yes, there was some form which they called self-styled Khilafats. But then that what happened to Islam. Yes, if you talk to the Occidental scholars, they will always say, well, what we see is the dark ages of Islam. They say it was a glorious time. All of this calligraphy and all of this Islamic architecture has happened all in the time of the Abbasid Caliphate, or the other caliphates that existed in between. But we must see that spiritually, Islam was about to dwindle. It only relied on the Mujaddideen that kept coming, who punctuated those 1300 years, different locations, different timings, especially at the turn of the century. So it relied on them to stay intact up to the time when the leadership, Khilafat ala Minhaj an-Nubuwwah, was to be established, and Islam was to be provided with a leader that had been missing all along in these 1300 years. In this time and age, when actually, like I mentioned, at the time of the advent of the Prophet ﷺ, people are actually seriously considering whether Islam even is a valid, whether Islam is even possible or not anymore. So you will have to have a leader who always keeps you on the track, who always streamlines your efforts and always leads you in the right direction.
The name of Islam is there, but the spirit is not. So that's the main thing. You cannot have the Islam as propagated and established by Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But you have Muslim, you have Islam, you have just Christianity, you have so many things. But the spirit of Islam is tied with the Khilafat institution of Khilafat, and this is not something new. It was established by Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
Amir Sahib would like to.
पूरे 2 घंटे हो गए हैं.
जी, Amir Sahib, abhi questions. There are a lot of questions.
Well, Sadr Sahib is in charge. I don't want to.
Amir Sahib, we've taken up a lot of your time and Asif Sahib's time as well. There's 50 questions remaining. It's going to be hard to answer those. I want to be very thankful to both of you and all the participants that joined us today.
Jazakallah. Jazakallah.
Amir Sahib, can we end with silent prayer?
Yes, sir. We'll do dua now, please. Well, you can ask yourself to come back for answer for those 50 questions, maybe in a couple of months.
Amir Sahib, I think Mohtam Sahib, do you want to just send out our email address?
So Jazakallah, everybody. You can, if any questions you would like to ask, you can send it to our email tarbiyyat@mkusa.org. We will, inshallah, get the answers to you, inshallah. And
Jazakallah, everyone, and Jazakallah, Asif Basit. That's very kind of you.
Jazakallah. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Wa alaikum salam.
Jazakallah.